What is going on in Texas right now? Funny, I was thinking about like a title for this episode, and I came up with this, Caroline. Tell me if it's too strong. Is Texas trying to destroy public schools? Too much?
I mean, I think it's a good question.
It's a good question because if it's intended or unintended, they are certainly hurting public schools in a massive way right now. And so down in Texas, Governor Abbott's team created a massive school funding boost to launch huge voucher programs in the state. But really who benefits and who gets left behind is, I think, what we've got to dig into. So Texas state legislature, which meets, by the way, I think it meets every other year. So in some states, the legislature approves budgets every year. In Texas, I think it does every other year, right? And so they have a House and a Senate, kind of like the federal government does, and they got to kind of agree on what the budget's going to be. So they got the House pitches a bill and the Senate pitches a bill, and then ultimately what happens? Well, anyway, they've done it. And so Texas is rolling out an $8.5 billion like school funding plan, and it sounds awesome, but it doesn't mean that public schools in any way benefit from this, all right? And with teacher raises hitting only really half of the staff because of this funding, it's I think it's a real problem. So let's get into the claimed benefits of this new legislation. So one, they say that this $8.5 billion education packet will bolster. A little tongue-tied? Yeah. Bolster teacher pay and help with early childhood and all this other stuff. So yay, what a great marketing thing if you're running for office and you want to get reelected. You help increase teacher pay. That's the claim, right? And then we're also helping with widespread school choice. And we're going to have a universal voucher program, which in Texas is an education savings account. And it's going to give roughly $10,000 per child towards private school. 85% of it publicly funded with up to $30,000 for special needs. And so that sounds awesome. We talked about school vouchers really leaving special needs children behind, but great job, Texas, on at least understanding that special needs children are going to need more attention to get them to become awesome, productive adults, right? And so giving them extra attention, 3X attention, by the way, according to the bill, makes a lot of sense. So I think that was really great intent. So I think that it helps. And then they claim, the proponents of this $8 billion package, $8 billion package, claim that it's choice for all, not just for the poor. It's going to help everyone. And the program's open to almost every Texas family, including wealthy ones. So it gives everyone a little bit of love out of the taxpayer money. Now, let's get into the actual real world effects and what you should know coming to the future, because, it's not just always the intent that matters. It's what are the effects? All right. So public schools are going to lose significant funding because of this. Now, don't forget that where the student goes, the money follows. And so if students leave because of a voucher, that means less money for the public school. Now, I've debated this issue countlessly. Well, yeah, I get that public schools got to continue to do better, but we've dug into that issue of their hands are tied often, and they are stuck with doing things that a lot of laws require them to do that they can't simply unwind and be more creative and more nimble. They're just simply not allowed. Okay, so the legislative budget projects right now a $250 million hit in the first year to public schools. $250 million hit. In a long-term forecast, they warned that if voucher use continues to rise, that Texas could face a $7 billion annual public school subsidy. So that's like by 2028. So that means $7 billion of taxpayer money is going to fund directly. And this is not just private schools, but charter schools, homeschools, whatever the voucher program is used for. So now you get all this taxpayer money going into, in many cases, private institutions' hands. And the question is public education a public good? Or is it just a private job to educate students, and it's just a business? Well, it's certainly a business now, but remember, $7 billion goes away means that public schools, where are they going to get the money to keep the schools up? And I know, I heard this just the other day. Well, just close the schools if there are no students, but we've dug into that before too. Public schools are not allowed to close schools. Families lose their minds if they try to do that. So they still have all these financial obligations. Every Texas school has these financial obligations, including soaring healthcare. Healthcare goes up every year, but their budgets are going down, and all the money's being siphoned and pushed towards all these other mechanisms. Now, Texas is doing it a little bit better than other voucher programs by adding that $30,000 for special needs kids. I don't know if that takes care of everybody. Okay. Second thing that this bill does is it claims that it gives raises. Well, man, that feels like a little bit of a false front to me, guys. It really does, because the House had pushed a bill that gave a raise to all staff. This included nurses, librarians, aides, custodians, bus drivers, etc., where the Senate bill said just for teachers. Well, ultimately, the Senate won. All right, so only the teachers got the increase in pay, and it wasn't a big, sizable increase. I mean, I don't have that number in front of me, but it was like 1% or 2%. I mean, the thing that I remember is when I was down in Texas watching some of this, is it didn't keep up with the rate of inflation. I'll tell you that much. So ultimately, the teachers are being paid less year over year compared to inflation. But the raise did not extend to nurses. I mean, they're important, right? Librarians. And really the ones that I thought hit me the hardest. And I heard a couple aides, teacher aides. I think they call them something different, but they're basically assistant teachers. And they are paid so poorly. And it's not the fault of the public schools. They don't have the money. And the state legislature apparently didn't think that the aides were doing a great job. Well, go meet with an aide. Go see what that assistant teacher is doing day in and day out. And then you tell me whether or not that's needed to increase that child's education. Right? So 50% of the staff didn't get a raise at all. So there were a couple school districts that really adamantly pushed back. So Lockhart ISD was one of them, and it warned that 41% of staff benefits are going down, right? Temple ISD called, I need to put this into context. Nationwide, no matter what state you're in, it's about $14,000 a district gets paid for every student that enrolls and attends. Now, that's not, it fluctuates. I mean, in Arizona, it's around 6,000. Some of the districts up in the Northeast, it's as much as 18, 19, 21,000, things like that. So Texas, I think it's around 13 with all the different packages, with all the like Title I funding and all these different things. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. Every district's slightly different. But basically, if it's around 13,000 a head, let's say per student, this bill gave an extra $55. $55. I mean, that's not even a % increase. So it's like throwing a 12-ounce cup of water on a burning house, right? It just doesn't do anything. Now, we can say, well, we gave them an increase, which sounds sexy, until you realize the increase was really a slap in the face, and it did nothing for them. So let's be real that Texas, you didn't increase funding for public schools. What you did is you increased a voucher bill that could add up to almost $7 billion long-term of money being siphoned directly to private institutions, right? And which have much less accountability than public schools. You don't know what their testing scores are. You don't know how much their leaders get paid. All right. So if you want transparency, you're not going to get it with voucher programs. Okay. So let's just don't forget that if transparency is important to you and how the children are being educated and how much their leaders get paid and how much their staff gets paid and their teachers get paid. And I'm going to back up, Carol. I'm going to tell you one story. Years ago, before I found Jesus in regarding public schools, I've always been a proponent of public schools, but I got to admit, I was busy, with 10,000 other things, trying to lawyer and doing psychology stuff, and I didn't pay as much of attention. I got invited to be on a charter school board, and I said, man, this sounds cool. It sounds all right, given options. So I thought it was cool too, man. I was on that side of the fence. And it was a local charter school, and the amount of money that this school was making and that the leadership was making was astronomical. I mean, they had 150, 200 students, and they were probably paid 50% more than the local superintendent that was teaching 100,000 students. And they were making so much money at this charter school. They had a foundation. Like they had money to take away from the educated children so they could create a foundation so the leaders of that foundation could give money away. Now, this was all taxpayer money, right? So remember, the money went from the taxpayer to the government, and the government gave it to the charter school, and then the charter school was making so much money, they had money to give it to a foundation that they then got to look like, these gracious people and dole out money to make friends. The money should go to educating the children, which is what public schools have got to do, by the way. If public schools have a foundation, it is from actual donations from people, not money they siphon off from the money they get from the state. I probably need to start talking about this more. Okay, and that is just such bunk to me. And that let me know, so you're not using all the money you get to educate the children? Then why do you need all this money? But nobody was paying attention because it was so cool to have a charter school, right? And it could be, I'm not ditching all charter schools. This one sucked. Okay, and they weren't doing the right thing. So if you're a charter school and you're listening to this and you're getting very mad at what I'm saying, then you look internally and tell me whether or not you're using those dollars to educate those kids. And if you say we're not, then don't get mad at me. You're doing the right thing, so don't worry about it, right? I mean, thou protest too much. Was that Shakespeare? King Lear? I can't remember. Once again, I didn't always go to school a lot when I was little. All right, so this one of the claims was that this minimal boost allotment in the student amount that each student was going to be allocated. The House wanted to give 395 student increase. That seemed pretty cool. Good job, House. 395 out of 13,000 is, a lot more. Senate trimmed it to 55, and apparently they won. So Midway ISD, I was looking up some data. They said that this means that they're only going to get an additional $500,000 in new funding. That sounds good, $500K in new funding. But they have a $5 million deficit because of all these other obligations that they're stuck with. $5 million minus $500,000 means $4.5 million deficit. And what are they supposed to do? How innovative can they be? And I think that what we should dig into is, I want to dig into the budgets of what school districts actually have to pay for. Okay, Carolina, I want to dig into that in the future. I want to explain all these massive liabilities that they have that maybe the potential competition doesn't have. I mean, like the maintenance of buildings, health insurance, mandatory salaries, all these different things, okay? And all their legal obligations that they have to comply with. And by the way, I'm not suggesting cutting the legal obligations. Title I, Title VI, Title IX. A lot of these laws are awesome. But why don't we require all the schools where any child is to have the same laws? You can't discriminate against the kids. Wouldn't that be a great law for everybody? Doesn't that seem fair? Okay. So I want to dig into these school budgets and maybe we get a guest on to help me out with this, CFO. Let's start maybe with district in Texas. So maybe that'll be a future one. If you got recommendations of who, let me know. All right. So there are also going to be a ton of forced cuts and staff shortages ahead. So TASBO's survey reports that 63% of districts expect to end 2025 with budget deficits. 63% of districts. That's over half. Last year, it was like 42% of districts were having budget deficits. So it's increasing. Now, at the same time this is going on, the Senate is pumping $255 million into charter school facilities. So that means like taking care of the buildings and maybe ADA compliant issues, which would be nice, right? And making sure they have good roofs and whatever all those things are. But they're cutting public school facility funding by over 67% over the next decade. So once again, charter schools are getting more to maintain their buildings and public schools are getting less. Why can't they get the same amount? Why can't they get the same percentage? Why are we treating one group of schools unfairly? Why is there not a level playing field? All right. So look, this appears to be a clear giveaway where public schools are on tight budgets and charter schools are getting a boost in infrastructure under this legislation. And I'm going to recap with intent here because we're going to talk about, I need to go back to this. Is Texas trying to destroy public schools, right? And I'm getting a stronger opinion every single second I talk, I think. So voucher excess and exclusion risk, right? So this SB2 voucher law, if you want to pull that up, is going to cover 90,000, almost 100,000 students by 2026. But don't forget, just like every voucher program across the United States, the schools that accept these vouchers do not have to accept all students, even those with special needs, even those with disabilities, even those that are struggling financially. They don't have to offer free and reduced lunches. They don't have to do any of that stuff. Now, Texas doing a little bit right where they're offering a larger voucher up to $30,000. So that's cool. But remember, they still don't have to accept people. So you're like, well, that sounds fair, right? Well, they don't have to accept everybody. But then what? But they're getting more money. They're getting more love. They're getting more attention. So meanwhile, public schools that have to take everybody are going to have continually budget shortfalls. They need to obviously go after and fight to enroll as many students as they can. That is a very difficult thing to do. It's not impossible, by the way. I mean, we do it for companies, for school districts all around the nation. But it certainly gets harder when they have facilities that are getting less attention than the charter schools. People like to be in nice schools. Heck. Okay. So I think that are they trying to kill public schools? I still want to have a positive intent with this. I do not believe that people are intentionally, not everybody, not a majority of people, are intentionally trying to destroy public schools. But I think that there are so many people that have got this false narrative that public schools don't do a good job. And the data doesn't show that, by the way. The statistics don't show that. What the actual research shows is that over the last 50 years, starting in the 70s, this was even before the Department of Education was enacted, by the way, actually going into the 60s, there were starting to be legal requirements that were, in some cases, very appropriate, put on public schools that made them have to have increased budgets just to enforce those laws, just to fill out the paperwork, just to monitor them, just to track them, just to do all those bureaucratic things. And that burden, necessary burden, that burden is not on private schools and charter schools. So then why are we giving them more money? Shouldn't they get less money because they have less of a burden? So here's where the hypocrisy occurs. Here's where the hypocrisy occurs. If you say, look, we don't want private schools. We don't want private schools, charter schools to be burdened by all these laws. I can live with that. I like that. That's fine. We want them to be nimble and adjust and people can pick. That's great. Fine. Fair enough. Give them less money then. Give them less money because you're requiring them to do less things. But if you're going to say the public schools have got to do all these things and require all these laws and all this transparency and FOIA requests and sunshine laws, then give them money to pay to do all those additional things. And that's not what's coming. That's not what's occurring. And that's why you are hurting public schools. That's why you are hurting private schools. I keep saying it. That's why you should, getting frustrated. That's why you should stop penalizing and hurting public schools, which is exactly what you're doing right now. And I don't know if you intended it or didn't intend, but it doesn't matter. Intention probably has no bearing. That is the logical, research-bound result of what's going on in so many states right now. So wake up and realize that you got a choice. You people have a choice. The legislatures, the community, the parents have a choice. If you want to kill public education, then say, I want to kill public education and own it. Now that's every society. Maybe that's for a future episode too. That's destroyed public education, the society gone the way of the dodos. It goes bye-bye. If you don't have good free public education for all students, you are doomed as a society. All right? But own what you're trying to do. I don't like hypocrites. And I don't like people that want to work under the cover of darkness, right? Now, if it's you actually just want to create more choice, you want to create more opportunities, that's awesome. But realize that's not the actual effect of what you're doing. So I can live with you. Please, you're trying to do the right thing, and I love you for it. I applaud you for it. You're trying to do the right thing. But the actual repercussions are not going to do what you want. So stop it. Go back to the drawing board and let's readjust. Maybe fine, give money, do the vouchers, but maybe that's 30 to 50% of what public schools get because of all these increased burden. And I'm going to end with that before I have a coronary. All right, I'll see you guys later. All right, peace.